Hello everyone. This speech was originally presented at our Friends of Science Society annual general meeting, May 29, 2023. I have added a few background plots designed to invoke some thought, but I will not be commenting on them. I would like to take the opportunity to publicly thank the current group of Friends of Science individuals and those that came before them for their dedication and contribution to this fight for common sense and sound technical and economic analysis through open dialogue. We are now entering our 21st year as an active nonprofit, primarily volunteer organization. When the organization was set up back in 2002, the founders did not realize that there would still be a need for this organization this far into the future. And sadly, that need has not diminished. The omissions and disinformation that is put out by the catastrophic anthropogenic global warming alarmist community has become increasingly mind-boggling and less scientific. But despite all the inaccurate propaganda, in many cases outright lies, the general public is waking up. The economic and environmental harm that the unnecessary, dangerous, ideologically driven and unscientific, alarmist-induced green initiatives cause has become very apparent. Inflation, the energy supply chain, and food crises can all be tied directly back to climate policy. Policy based on ideologically based pseudoscience. That pseudoscience is gradually breaking down under its own ineptitude. Here are a few examples from the last few years. The climate models that underpin the entire alarmist narrative run too hot. Not my words, that is the modeler's position. I have looked at the model projections and the empirical data and can echo their sentiment. The projections shown here use a reasonable emission scenario, SSP to 4.5, and still run too hot. The IPCC has self-acknowledged that the higher emission scenarios like SSP3 7.0 and SSP5 8.5 have a low likelihood of coming to pass. Many prominent researchers have been more direct and labeled them as highly implausible. The top plot here shows emission scenarios. The bottom plot shows their estimated temperature response as per the IPCC models that run too hot. Now, we can tie 1 and 2 together. A reasonable, in my opinion, emission scenario like SSP2 4.5 still runs too hot in the models. Only a couple of the many modeling groups, 2 Russian and 1 of 6 Chinese models, even come close to observed temperatures. And somehow these models are still being used to dictate climate policy. You can see here how bad the climate models perform, the Canadian ones. Using a reasonable emission scenario, the Canadians predicted temperatures 2.6 times above those observed in the real world. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has now officially recognized that the sun is going into a grand solar minimum later this decade. Grand solar minimums are associated with colder temperatures and societal upheaval over and above what we are already experiencing. And temperatures have already been dropping since 2015. That drop will continue, the current El Nino notwithstanding, and potentially accelerate over the next few decades. NOAA also produces a satellite temperature data set, STAR, that was recently recalibrated. STAR used to lean to the alarmist viewpoint along with the RSS remote sensing system, leaving UAH, the University of Alabama Huntsville, as the outlier. As the outlier, UAH was routinely dismissed even though they were the only satellite data set that agreed with the radiosonde, i.e. weather balloon, data. RSS is now the outlier, which kind of begs the question, is NOAA trying to change their narrative to conform with a skeptical realist viewpoint? We shall see. Even our federal government's parliamentary budget officer has thrown water on the alarmist dumpster fire, showing that full global compliance with the 2015 Paris Accord will only improve our GDP by 0.8%, 80 years from now. That is roughly equivalent to just $17 billion at a 2% per year growth rate. All those savings and a delayed temperature rise of just 0.17 degrees centigrade for at best a few years for just a few trillion dollars. That 0.17 degrees is based on the IPCC science. Apparently Justin Trudeau believes spending trillions to save billions represents a good business case. There is no empirical carbon dioxide temperature data set, which is a very basic scientific method requirement, that shows CO2 driving the climate on any statistically significant historical timescale. So you do not have to understand climate science to understand that there are some serious problems with the alarmist narrative. They are operating on a narrative that has no scientific proof behind the premise. They are using computer models that run too hot and emission scenarios that are implausible, all to justify green initiatives that offer no economic, societal, or even environmental gain. Now, I do not make that statement lightly and can produce the data that backs that statement up, some of which you have seen in the video. The points I have provided are more than enough evidence to discredit the alarmist narrative on a scientific and economic basis. Unfortunately, the ideology that permeates our political, media, and sadly a far too large percentage of the general public that has trouble thinking for themselves is still strong and will be a problem for many years to come. We, climate realists, have made positive gains, but we need to continue pushing back against these unscientific, uneconomic, unneeded, and frankly dangerous, insidious green policies. I believe Friends of Science has done an extremely effective job of speaking out against both the pseudoscience and the economic and societal pitfalls of green policy, despite an annual budget of just $150,000. That is a small fraction of even one of the many organizations that are pushing the green agenda on behalf of our governments and their UN WEF advisors. The attack on our way of life and freedom through our energy, food, monetary, medical, and other requirements has accelerated and is morphing our society into a global totalitarian regime. I do not want that for my or your children and grandchildren. And as always, we are extremely grateful for our members' past support, but that support needs to continue. And we need, and I mean really need, our membership to grow. We hope you will continue down this path with us and bring along some friends and family. Our futures are on the line.